The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Wednesday, May 8th. Hope everybody's having a fantastic week. All right, so we have I think a full show today. So we will start out at part one. I'll start calling them parts instead of hours, but part one will be dedicated to a news roundup, as always. Part two, I'll answer your super chat questions. Part three, we will cover Dugin on Tucker. And of course, if you ask questions during part three, we will have a part four where I answer those questions. So a lot of this is, in terms of content, is up to you. I am willing to go as long as you have questions, comments, suggestions. Use the super chat for that, and let's jump right in. I want to do a little. We'll start off a little segment on Biden's foreign policy in the Middle East, given the news today that the United States has basically halted certain arms shipments to Israel as a way to suggest gently to the Israelis that they better behave themselves and do what the Biden administration tells them to do. So they're using these weapons in order to prevent Israel from going into Rafah, which is necessary for Israel to win, to actually achieve victory. So the Biden administration is actively, while saying they fully support Israel, and the defense secretary today said that the United States' commitment to Israel's defense is ironclad. But the Biden administration was not convinced by Israel's plan to secure the humanitarian, safety concerns of Gazans in Rafah, and therefore they withheld the shipment of the smart bombs, right? Smart bombs, and they're going to wait and see whether the Israelis behave themselves before they send these bombs. This is pretty unprecedented and pretty extreme, but there you have it. And this is, an indication of kind of how Biden has tried to place constraints on what the Israeli government wants to do in its assessment in order to defend itself and defend its citizens and to destroy Hamas and to actually achieve a long-term, at least partial solution to the problem by eliminating Hamas. The Biden administration seems dedicated to join the demonstrators on campuses in an effort to preserve Hamas and to keep them in power and to keep them going. God forbid Israel actually destroys them. God forbid Israel actually eliminates them. So they're doing that. At the same time, Biden administration is sending a lot of senior people to Saudi Arabia to try to convince the Saudis to cut a deal with Israel. Saudi Arabia has placed constraints on a deal with Israel that Israel seems unwilling to accept, constraints that are associated with a Palestinian state. Saudi Arabia is interested in a defense treaty with the United States. If the United States is ever attacked, the Saudis will come to the United States' defense. No, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Oh, the other way around. If the Saudis ever get attacked, this treaty would specify that the United States come to the Saudis' defense, right? And of course, this is triggered by, by the Saudis concerned about the Iranians, primarily. That is their main worry. The Houthis to the south of them, the Iranian affiliated militias in Iraq and in Syria to the north of them. They're kind of surrounded by Shiites who would love to destroy the Saudi monarchy. And therefore, the monarchy, the United States, should commit to preserving the monarchy in exchange for, I'm not exactly sure what the Saudis give the Americans in exchange for this security guarantee. The United States have said no security guarantee without a deal with Israel. So far, nothing is happening. The whole place is kind of a stalemate. But you know, the Biden administration is constantly groveling before the Saudis to try to cut this deal sooner rather than later. It is interesting that why would the Saudis want a United States, guarantee? I mean, why would they want an actual treaty? Of course, remember, a treaty has to be passed by Congress. So even if the Biden administration signs on this, you'd have to get it by Congress, which is not going to be easy. And this is part of why they want to wrap it into a deal with Israel, because then if it's wrapped into a deal with Israel, it'll get much more support in Congress. That's kind of part of the thinking. But why do they want this, right? Why do they want this? Well, partially they want it because in 2019, Saudi Arabia was directly attacked by maybe the first use of a drone swarm. A swarm of drones attacked a major refinery in Saudi Arabia and took it out, created incredible damage. And the Saudis expected that the United States would do something in response, that they would respond, right? I mean, this is an ally, supposedly. And the Trump administration basically did, the technical term is nothing, nada. They did nothing. So the Saudis concluded from this that the Americans could not be trusted, and that if Saudi Arabia was going to implicitly put it this way, an implicit guarantee of Saudi security provided by the Americans was worthless. What they want was an explicit one, and that's why the Saudis are pushing to this. All of this in the context of the fact that when Biden came into office, he basically said, we don't like the Saudis. We don't want the Saudis. MBS is a war criminal. He's a bad guy, which he is, all true. Human rights violations. We are going to be very, very tough with the Saudis. Then oil prices went up, and there was a bout of inflation, and Biden wanted the Saudis to pump oil out, and suddenly he changed his tune, and he was best friends with the Saudis. And in 2022, he went over there personally to grovel before the Sheikh of the Desert and to ask for his forgiveness for all the nasty things he had said about him in the past. And MBS granted forgiveness and again started pumping oil out the other side. All at the same time, by the way, those first 2 years of the Biden administration, when they were still mad at the Saudis for human rights violations. They also, during that period, were also trying to get the Iranians, please, let's have a new nuclear deal. We can negotiate, we can find something, and the Iranians just dragged them along. And it's only after they concluded that Iran would not come through did the Biden administration turn to the Saudis for help. In other words, just like pretty much every other administration in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian Middle East conflict, the Biden administration has no clue what they're doing. They're not guided by principle. They're not guided by strategy. They are shooting from the hip. They have no understanding of the motivations of the Iranian regime. They have no understanding of the capabilities of the Iranians or the Saudis or the Israelis. They shoot from the hip. They try different things. They emotionally respond. Oh, we've got students demonstrating on campuses. We better shut down arms to Israel. Oh, I don't know what the Saudis, are going to reduce the amount of oil that they're going to produce. We better be nice to them and grovel before them so that they increase the amount of oil they produce. I mean, my point in doing this is not any of these particular concretes, although I think they're all interesting. It's to emphasize again, I've tried to do this many, many times, but emphasize again, the fact that the Biden administration, but really no American administration, maybe since World War II, has had a foreign policy strategy, has an idea of what they're trying to achieve in the Middle East, has a plan that is more than a few days into the future. We call that a strategy. None of these regimes, administrations have had a long-term foreign policy strategy. And this is how the West got in, how Hamas got power. You remember? Again, people don't remember this. This is why I have to repeat it and remind you guys of it. But you should remember. You should have it carved somewhere. The fact that that Hamas would not be in power today, would not be anywhere really of significance, if not for the Bush administration insisting that the Israelis have an election among the Palestinians. And then, in spite of Israel's resistance, insisting that Hamas was a legitimate part of that, and Hamas should be part of that election, which happened in 2005. This is the Bush administration, in spite of Israel's wishes, insisting Hamas was a legitimate power to any kind of political deal, any kind of democracy for the Palestinian people. We know how that went. Hamas won. Palestinian Authority didn't really want to give up their power. And so Hamas basically took over Gaaza, killed the Palestinian Authority officials or sent them packing, and basically has ruled the Gaza Strip since then. Or we should all be thankful to George W. Bush, right? So American foreign policy is a complete and utter disaster, a mess, and I've given you the example of Ronald Reagan. I mean, they're clueless. When they get the Middle East, they go brain dead and clueless, and they have no understanding of anything that's going on. And of course, they have zero, null, nada strategy about how to achieve whatever goals they might have for the region or for the United States' place in the region. Talk about clueless presidents. Are you guys following this hush money trial? I try not to talk a lot about it because it's so stupid. And it's so stupid on two counts. One is, it's probably not a trial that should ever happen, in a sense that I don't know that there's a real criminal offense here, even though all the stuff that the government is accusing Trump of doing is real. Whether it actually rises to a criminal offense is a question. It's probably a misdemeanor. And the second is, it's like a stupid, salacious, ridiculous kind of trial that I would never follow if it was anybody else. Now, the fact that it's Trump is entertaining and funny, but it's also pretty despicable and horrific. This is a guy who is supposed to, was president of the United States and will be, there's a high likelihood that he will be president of the United States again. And yet, yeah, Trump denies it. Let's believe Trump, right? Trump denies it. I mean, almost everything in the trial, there's no question Trump did. Again, the only question is, should he rise up? Did he sleep with Stormy Daniels? Well, of course he did. I mean, is there any doubt that he slept with a Playboy playmate? Of course he did. I mean, is he a philanderer? Of course he is. I mean, he's admitted to it in many occasions. Did he pay them money? Yes. I mean, the checks are there. Of course he paid the money. He signed the checks. What did he pay the money for? I don't know, because he liked them. He was really, really concerned about their well-being, and he liked them. I mean, he paid them to shut it down, right? He paid them so that they would not reveal their stories. Right? And he's going to go after Stormy Daniels because she has not told the story, and the agreement he had with her was that she would owe him $1 million if she actually revealed the story. So this is, all the facts clearly unequivocally true, right? It's just a question. So Stormy Daniels was, but it's just, this is the president of the United States. This is, So Stormy Daniels was on the stand yesterday, and she started going after. Stormy Daniels is, by the way, a porn star, or was a porn star, and this is the quality of the people Donald Trump sleeps with. And she and many of you might think, "Wow, isn't that cool?" And I want to throw up somewhere. I find that pretty low and disgusting. But anyway, Donald Trump, she told the whole story about how he dressed when she first met him, and then I guess she got into the details of the sex. I mean, even the judge was embarrassed. He basically said, "Stop it! Way too much detail." He told the prosecution, "Stop asking all these questions. These details are irrelevant to the actual case. Shorter answers and stop all this." Yeah, Edward thinks it's cool to sleep with a porn star, and it's cool that the president of the United States slept with a porn star. This is the state of the culture, that you get people who think that's cool, and you think that's what men do. It's disgusting. It's despicable. And I'm not a prude. I'm all for, having sex, but have some self-respect, just a little bit. Anyway, so all of this articulated. One of the things that came to my mind was, at least presidents in the past, when they slept around, when they slept with women who were not their wives, had taste, right? At least I think so, right? At least JFK, if you're gonna sleep around, if you're president of the United States and you can sleep with anybody, and you're gonna cheat on your wife, then do it with Marilyn Monroe, which is what JFK did. But that I get. But Stormy Daniels? Really? I mean, how cheap and low and, no self-respect do you have to have? I mean, it's just a little bit lower, not a lot, but a little bit lower than Monica Lewinsky, right? Monica Lewinsky at least wasn't a porn star, but she was she was young, and she was an intern, and it's just pathetic. And she wasn't that hot, just pathetic, right? So, granted, Bill Clinton has bad taste. It turns out Donald Trump has even worse taste, right? Even worse taste. So this is what we are in a culture, and the reality is that he's got a good chance of being the next president. The reality is that when Republicans had options, 7, 8 options, this is who they chose. Knowing all this about him, knowing what he said about grabbing women, knowing everything that he said, everything that he's done, his character, his character, that's the main thing. I mean, Paul Ryan, I know, you guys don't think much of Paul Ryan, but I actually like Paul Ryan, at least in some respects of him. I wish he had courage. The one thing I don't like about Paul Ryan is that he landed up being a coward. But Paul Ryan says he won't vote for Donald Trump. He won't vote for Biden either, but he won't vote for Donald Trump, and he won't vote for Donald Trump because character matters to him, and he won't vote for somebody with as low a character as Trump. And absolutely good for Paul Ryan. He said last election he didn't vote for him either. He wrote in another Republican's name. He said he would do the same thing this time. He's not sure whose name he will write in, but he will somebody's. I do find it interesting that Donald Trump, running right now unopposed in the primaries, is still losing about 15, 16% of the vote to an opponent, Nikki Haley, who's not even running, who dropped out, but people are still voting for her. There's a significant portion, maybe it's only 15, 16%, of the people who show up to vote. They make the effort to go vote, who doesn't like Trump, and they're not going to vote for him. And we'll see what happens in the thing. He is leading in all the polls. He's leading in all the polls that matter, which are the swing states. He does look like he's going to win unless the polls are somehow off significantly, which is possible, I guess, but hard to tell. Anyway, this is the guy. This is the guy so many want as president of the United States, and they are very much likely to get him as president of the United States. So I think it's just sad for all of us that this is the choice we get. Biden, Trump, both about as bad of candidates as one can think. Stephen, thank you for the sticker. Let me see quickly here. John, thank you for getting us off with the sticker right off the bat. I appreciate that. Thank you guys for helping us reach our targets. All right, a couple of California stories. Always like to fill you in on what's going on in the great state of California. California is considering a bill that would actually ban self-checkout. And actually, when I saw the headline for this, California bill may remove self-checkout lanes at grocery stores and other certain retailers, I was like, wow, is this the Luddites? Is this like, this takes away jobs and we can't afford the jobs? And is this what's going on in California, the center of high tech? And you will be, I think, relieved to know that that is not the reason. The reason, in many respects, is even more shocking than that. It's even worse than that, right? It's not about human jobs. Nope, not about human jobs. They are the home of Silicon Valley. They know about human jobs. No, they're not doing it for that. Oh, God. They're doing it. Yeah, Mary Eileen has it. She gets it. They're doing it to prevent shoplifting. Like, people go in, they might scan one item, but they've got 5 items in the bag, and they walk out. And God forbid, or whoever forbid, I guess the state of California forbid, that they actually deploy police and end this and put some people in jail and maybe punish them significantly, not slap on the wrist and let them go so they can go steal some more, but something far more serious and let them spend significant time in jail. No, that would be crazy. We can't do that. Basically, what we're going to have in California is the government telling stores, look, we can't protect you. We can't protect you from. Whoops, what is going on here? Sorry. There we go. We can't protect you from thieves. We can't do anything about shoplifting. So instead, we're going to force you. We're going to force you. Not let the stores decide if it's in their self-interest. We're going to force you not to have self-checkouts, and that'll reduce theft, and then you should be happy with us. It's really crazy. It really is insane. Soon they will require by law that stores put everything, all their products behind, I don't know, barbed wire or glass, locked glass or locked other stuff. Did you see this video where there's a guy and he goes to an Apple store and he just starts stuffing iPhones into his pockets, and people are standing around, they do nothing, and he's just stuffing iPhones into his pockets, and then he walks out the door and there's a police car parked right in front of the Apple store. And he just walks by the police car and he gets into some car waiting for him and he drives off. It's like, was the police car just parked there because the guy was at the Starbucks next door or at the Dunkin' Donuts getting donuts? What was the... And the guy who was stuffing the iPhones, he saw the police car standing there and he didn't even think twice about walking out and going to his car and driving off. Because God, I mean, the last people in the world you'd expect to stop you from stealing iPhones at an Apple store are the police. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, if the police did their job, I mean, and if they lack resources, Anyway, yeah, so California going to ban self-checkout because they can't handle the theft. And the amazing thing is that this is California legislation. This is not a store here, a store there deciding to do this. This is the state of California making this required for all stores. But California is not done yet. Don't worry. There are more bills in front of the California Senate. One of the more important bills, landmark bills are being called, is a bill that is going to regulate AI. Federal government is not getting an act together to regulate AI. The Europeans have a very extensive bill to regulate AI, which is basically going to make Europe irrelevant when it comes to AI. Nobody's going to go there because the bill is so harsh. As we'll talk about later, I think we'll get to that story. Basically, Europe is irrelevant when it comes to technology, period. There's just nothing going on there, maybe with the exception of Sweden. There's just nothing going on in Europe because of the only thing they're good at. The only thing they're good at is regulation, controlling, and killing innovation. So California is going to join Europe in putting a bill together. Of course, the California bill will be better than the European bill because the California bill will be crafted and is being crafted right now with the help of guess who? Well, I mean, it doesn't take much to figure out who's going to rush to try to influence the bill. And that is the large tech giants, the large tech companies that all are developing AI. They have the resources, the money, the lawyers, the lobbyists, the experts to go to California, to go to the California legislature and try to make sure that whatever regulations are passed restricting AI will not prevent them from doing whatever the hell they want, but will prevent, probably, most likely, the startups, the competitors, particularly the ones outside of California, but yeah, from threatening their ability to develop AI as the way they see fit. AI is a real opportunity for a lot of startups to challenge big tech. It's well, aspects of it, it's quite expensive. Capital has been raised. They've got the capital to go out and compete against the biggest companies in the world. But if the regulations add significant burden on top of that, a burden that a small company cannot handle, then the big companies will dominate this. And of course, this is exactly, this is what government wants. They want, you see, the fallacy is that that government wants small companies. They don't want small companies. They don't want small business. Small businesses are hard to control. What they want are big businesses completely beholden to the government. I mean, when Microsoft was sued for antitrust, the remedy was not breaking Microsoft up. You'd think that if they opposed big companies, they'd break up Microsoft. No. Instead, the remedy was that a government-appointed bureaucrat would sit at Microsoft and control and oversee and have final authority over every corporate decision they made. So what the ultimately government wants is control. What ultimately the regulators want is fascism. Fascism in the economic sense of letting you pretend you run your company, but really it's that bureaucrat who sits in the corner over there. He's really running the company, and he reports to the higher ups, in the bureaucratic, regulatory, what is it, superstructure, whatever it's called, in the swamp. And again, doesn't matter Republicans or Democrats, they all basically want the same thing. They all want control. They want control of a big business. Controlling a lot of little competitive businesses, very hard to do. Very hard to do. So this is why they all strive. They want to sue the big businesses, but they're unlikely to want to break them up. And, by regulating them, they actually make it very difficult for small businesses to compete with them. So they make it such that the big businesses thrive. The big businesses thrive and succeed. And it's a way of giving them monopoly power, right? Creating barriers to entry that are government barriers to entry, not market barriers to entry, that they did. Edward thinks that Trump drained the swamp. Oh, Edward, how naive, how naive. That's pretty funny, actually. As I said at the time, all Trump did, first of all, he didn't drain anything, but he replaced a few swamp animals with his own. And in the second term, he's not going to drain the swamp at all. He's accepted the swamp. He's going to basically replace a lot of the swamp animals with his own, but that's all he's going to do. There's nothing about the swamp that Trump can or has any intention of draining. Government spending went up under Trump. The number of bureaucrats who worked for government went up under Trump. The number of political operatives who are leftists who worked for the government went up under Trump. Nothing changed. The only way to drain the swamp, seriously now, the only way to drain the swamp is to starve it. The only way to starve the swamp is to cut government spending. Literally, cut government spending. You will know that the drain is being swamped. The drain is being swamped. There you go. The swamp is being drained. You will know that is happening when a president proposes a budget and insists on a budget passing, vetoes anything else that actually reduces government spending, not reduces the growth in the future, which Republicans pretend is like cutting spending, but actually nominally in real terms, well, not in real terms, in absolute terms, reduces the size, the amount spent by the government. If for every dollar they spent, now they spend 85 cents. That's the day you'll know the swamp is being drained. Until then, it's all BS, propaganda, people just talking. But only action matters in this case, and the only action that matters when it comes to draining a swamp is, again, eliminating the source of the swamp, what the swamp lives off of, which is government spending, that's their lifeline. So just veto every budget that comes to your desk, including if that shuts down the government, until Congress provides you with a budget that literally spends X number of dollars less than the government spent the year before. That's as simple as it is. That's what a president dedicated to draining the swamp would do, and that's certainly not what Trump, Biden, Bush, Obama, Clinton, Reagan, any of them did. None of them did that. TikTok, we talked about the fact that Congress has passed a bill and Biden has signed the bill to force TikTok to either sell or shut down. TikTok yesterday filed a lawsuit against the government action, claiming that this is a violation of the First Amendment right of the company and a violation of First Amendment right of their American users. I hope TikTok wins, because I think that's absolutely right. The reality is that, yes, Chinese government users and the algorithm on TikTok is there to manipulate American public opinion. That's the problem of Americans. Stop being influenced by TikTok. Stop accepting TikTok. If you're a parent, stop letting your kid watch TikTok. There is no national security issue here. Words are not actions. Words are not violence. Words are protected. Words are protected. An algorithm is protected speech. What's not protected are actions. But where's the national security threat here? There is none. So it's going to be interesting to see how the courts think about this, how they deal with it, if they see the wider implications of this, right? And, what if the New York Times decides it's going to tilt people towards the left by providing them with extremely biased content, which is, of course, what the New York Times have been doing since the 1920s, or certainly since the 1930s, and even more extremely so over the last 20 so years. Should the government then say, oh, no, you're trying to change public opinion, you've got a political goal here, we're shutting you down? It's clearly a violation of the First Amendment. Now, the fact here that the Chinese government has some influence does not, I don't think in and of itself constitutes any change in that. There is no such thing as election meddling if all you're doing is arguing a point. What's illegal is stuffed ballots, buying votes, preventing people from getting to the voting place. All of those things are election meddling. But, telling people that Putin's a good guy and Biden's a bad guy and Zelensky is a Nazi, yeah, that's election meddling, but you've got a First Amendment right to do it. You've got a First Amendment right to lie. Think about what would happen to people like Tucker Carlson if you didn't have a First Amendment right to lie. Think about what would happen to Donald Trump if you didn't have a First Amendment right to lie. Think about all the conspiracy theorists on left and right who constantly fill our airways with junk, trying to sway an election. And they're lying to us. 99.9% of all politicians lie. Should we stop them? This isn't fraud. Saying lies is not fraud. The fraud is when you are lying about a product or a service that you are providing. In an election, if you ban fraud, if you ban not fraud, if you ban lying, there would be no elections. That's it. That's how Putin got into power. You ban lying means ban opposition, ban everybody you don't like, ban everybody you disagree with, and that's how you get rid of freedom. So, no, the government should not have anything to do with election meddling if the election meddling is just what people say. Now, it can tell, it can say, it can say to Facebook, look, these things are Russian bots. We're just letting you know, you decide if you still want them. And it could be that it's in Facebook's self-interest not to allow that, and Twitter's interest not to allow bots and Russian bots and Chinese bots and so on. But it's not the government's job, and I thought conservatives got this, it's not the government's job to ban the bots. The government should have no business in speech, whether the speech is funded by a foreign country or funded by anybody. If our population is so gullible as to believe this crap, we deserve the people who get elected as a consequence. I don't deserve it. Most of you don't deserve it. But this is the world in which we live. The injustice is towards us. And the government's job is not to protect us from the injustice of elections. All right, we talked about Saudi Arabia earlier. I think we've talked about this in a previous show. MSB, the dictator of Saudi Arabia, he's actually technically not the dictator, he's technically number two. Is he the son of the king? I think he's the son of the king or the nephew of the king. Hard to tell with the way the Saudis do this, and it depends which mother, and because they have multiple wives and all of this. Anyway, MBS, who runs Saudi Arabia, has basically decided to diversify the economy away from oil. And to help him do that, he has decided to build a new city that ultimately will house maybe up to 10 million people. So a major new city. He plans this major new city to be long and narrow, about 105 miles long and very narrow, less, I think 1.2 miles or 1.2 miles width, right? 105 miles long, 1.2 miles width. The design for this right now is that on both sides of this 105-mile long thing, there will be basically one solid skyscraper that goes 105 miles length and is going to be in places, not everywhere, but in places, so the height will change. And in places will be taller than the Empire State Building. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. This is a real project. 105-mile. Some estimates are saying that this thing is going to cost, of course, this is all centrally planned, all funded by the Saudi government, that this thing is going to cost, when everything is added up, $2 trillion. Given the insanity of this project, it's unlikely to attract any private funding. So this is going to be basically government funding to do the whole thing. Right now, they're planning an initial phase, which is going to be 1.5 miles of this insanely large, tall structure, right? The ultimate plan, right, is going to have significantly more office space, not office space, just square footage of space than the entire city, the entire island of Manhattan, right? It's going to be more built up than the entire island of Manhattan in terms of space, but it's going to be in straight lines, and they're going to have a high-speed train going back and forth, and you'll be commuting by train. They're building this first 1.5-mile segment, right? And this is already scaled back. The initial phase one was supposed to be 10 miles. They're scaling back to 1.5. The thing will be, as I said earlier, the world's largest building, the equivalent of more than 60 Empire State Buildings in terms of square footage. This is going to be massive. And that's just in phase one again, right? That's just the 1.5. Now, of course, the government's building this. Nothing is going smoothly. The poor Saudis, I feel sorry for them. They, for weeks, thousands of trucks and diggers work 24 hours a day. They can in Saudi Arabia. I don't think there are any overtime laws there. Scooping millions of cubic feet of sand and moving them to a hill that they were putting them on. And then suddenly they realized that they had dumped all the sand, all this dirt, in a spot where the architects were planning to dig a waterway from the Red Sea, so that you could have water effects throughout this and have water flowing around this 105. So they had to dig up all the sand that they had dumped in what was going to be the waterway and move it somewhere else, right? And this is just part of the many, many hiccups and problems and delays and cost overruns that this project is going to be entail. I will never see the project because I have no intention ever to go to Saudi Arabia. I have no intention ever to go to Dubai or the United Arab Emirates or any of these places. I find the very idea of blood-curdling. I mean, these are monarchies, sheikdoms, where people have no freedom. MBS, because he's so generous and so open-minded, has allowed women to drive. Women are allowed to drive now. But at the same time, he has taken the speech codes in Saudi Arabia and made them even tougher. So now, there's even less free speech in Saudi Arabia than there was before. These are countries I have no interest in going to. I mean, when they become, constitutional republics, I will go visit them. Not going to Abu Dhabi, not going to any of these places. Qatar, certainly not. Kuwait, certainly not. Nowhere in Saudi Arabia. I'm just uninterested. I will die quite happy without ever having to go to places like that. And anyway, we all wish Saudi Arabia good luck with this project. I'm sure we all do. The best wishes. It's going to be quite a spectacle and going to be quite interesting to watch. Talk about spectacles. Here's the weirdest story you've probably ever seen. I mean, this is the headline. And it turns out the headline is true. RFK Jr., you know, RFK Jr. is running for president. Got a lot of money behind him. A lot of people love this guy, right? RFK, I mean, but this explains a lot. I mean, all the weirdness in RFK, the way he talks and his stupid ideas and everything. I mean, this headline explains it exactly. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it says RFK Jr. says parasite ate part of his brain. I mean, I'm not laughing at RFK Jr. I should be more sensitive. It really is kind of sad. I know I'm getting accused one day of laughing at a parasite eating RFK Jr.'s brain, and I'm really not. I guess I am. Basically, RFK Jr. said that doctors have told him that they did an MRI and everything. They thought he had a tumor at some point. And what they discovered, that there was a dead parasite inside his brain. And this happened in 2012 after he'd been experiencing memory loss, significant memory loss. He'd had the MRI and he'd had treatment with doctors, and he was ready actually to have a they thought it was a tumor, have an operation before they figured out that it was actually a dead parasite who had eaten part of his brain. All I can think of, and this all came out during a deposition in 2012 in a divorce proceeding with his second wife, where he discussed the symptoms of this and his cognitive struggles, and the fact that a parasite had eaten part of his brain. To make it clear, RFK Jr. says, I have cognitive problems, clearly. I have short-term memory loss, and I have long-term memory loss that affects me. Now, this is the guy. This is the guy with an eaten-up brain who, for many people, is more attractive than Biden or Trump as a potential president. I mean, this is where it goes. I mean, God, we live in a crazy world. You think there'd be an alternative to Biden, Trump, who didn't have his brain eaten by a parasite? You would think, but turns out probably not. This is the best we're going to do in terms of an alternative. All right, let's see, a quick economic story. So one of the things that happened during the pandemic, during COVID, is, as we all know, the government basically sent us checks. Here's money. Here's money to survive the pandemic. And we all got checks, everybody. Those of you who own small businesses, you also got checks from the government of a loan that was later forbidden. So small businesses got checks. And it turned out that this was very, very good for the American people. People basically put them in their saving account, hung on to it. They didn't need the cash to spend. They were doing okay. And savings in the United States just went through the roof. It went up to well over $2 trillion of saving. Now, of course, what else happened is, as we started spending that savings, starting in mid-2021, Americans started pulling money out of their saving accounts and spending it. And as we started spending that money had a predictable effect of causing prices to go up. That's what happens. When you print money, you start spending it, prices go up. Production hasn't gone up, only the amount of money has gone up, and you get inflation. So we've gotten inflation. The good news on the inflation front, maybe not on other economic fronts, is that as of March of this year, basically we've eaten up all the savings from the COVID, right? We've eaten them up, we spent them all. Right now, we are starting to spend other savings as a economy, as consumers. So there's this great graph of how saving go like this, starting with the Trump stimulus and PPP, and then the Biden stimulus, and they just go straight up through, early 2021, and then they start declining very slowly, and they basically go to zero in March of this year, or just before March of this year. And that suggests, I don't know, that maybe some of the economic some of the things that caused the inflation also caused a lot of Americans to go out and spend, and that spending created some economic activity, and maybe that slowed down a potential recession. Who knows? But anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting that you could actually, in a graph, see all that money that during COVID was saved just disappear into savings, into spending, and go away. And we're back to, in terms of individuals' ability, individual saving, back to where we were before COVID. All right, let's see. Maybe we'll do. Yeah, I mean, we'll do. Let's do 2 stories, and then we'll call this part of the show done. We're still short of what we should be doing for an hour show. So those of you who can support the show, would consider supporting the show, think the show is of value to you. This show is funded through the support of people like you. Please consider supporting the show and getting the super chat up, ask questions, particularly 20, 50, 100, and so on questions, because those are the ones who really make the difference. So right now, there are basically zero nuclear reactors poised for construction in the United States. The last new reactor at Plant Vogtle in Georgia has started operation. It's reached commercial operation. That project, which cost over $30 billion, more than double the initial estimate, not surprising, and plagued with delays and design changes. That's it. That is the last. There's nothing in construction. There is no new nuclear power going to be coming online for who knows how long. The hope is still that you get some of these micro reactors going, but there really is very little prospect of that even. There are big federal tax credits to nuclear producers if they want to use them, but nobody wants to take the risk. The regulations on nuclear power are so hazardous to your health, or so hazardous to the health of the companies who start and try to do this, that they're just not interested in pursuing this. In spite of the fact that people are panicky and hysterical about climate change, the obvious solution is nuclear power. There is basically no new nuclear reactors poised to being started building, never mind going into operation. If they build a big nuclear power plant, it could take a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades to get into operation. If they build smaller ones, nobody knows what the regulators will approve and what they won't approve. Just to emphasize this, because, and I'm going to have a guest to talk about this, just to emphasize this is not only the cleanest, but literally the safest energy producing technology available today. It turns out fewer people have died in nuclear accidents than from windmills. I guess falling off windmills during maintenance, or from, what do you call it, solar panels, or from any other source of energy. Literally the cheapest. I'm thinking of having Robert Bryce, who's very good on this on the show, to talk in more depth. We've got investment tax credits, we've got federal tax credits, and yet regulations are strangling any attempts to do this. Nuclear power reactors don't cause cancer. They don't cause any issues. Zero, nada, nothing. The more you study it, the more you discover this is a clean, safe. Japan has finally turned back on its nuclear power reactors. France, 90% of their electricity is from nuclear power reactors. They don't have any more cancer than anybody else. There's just no risk here. Zero. Except government power, government control, government regulation, government panic, environmentalists freaking out, environmentalists' nuttiness. That is what drives the fear and the panic around all of this. Ryan, thank you. Jonathan, thank you. Mark, thank you. Some stickers. Mary Aline, thank you. Stephen, thank you. Indeed, if everybody just did like Ryan, $2.99 or something like that, we would at least make our 1 hour goal, maybe not our 3 hour goal, but our 1 hour goal. So please consider doing a sticker to support the show. Okay, so this is that was the nuclear power. Relating to regulation, Ericsson CEO Borge Ekholm. Ericsson is I think it's a Swedish company. Basically, Ericsson's CEO went out a few days ago and basically warned Europe that the focus of Europeans on regulation, the focus on Europeans on breaking up on antitrust, the focus on Europeans on preemptively regulating things like AI is undermining competition, driving the continent towards what he called irrelevance. Irrelevance. He cautioned that Europe is falling behind in digital infrastructure, risks becoming a mere tourist destination. You know, Europe is where you go to see the past. There's nothing futuristic going on in Europe. There are no companies, there's no activity, there's nothing, right? He says Europe will become a mere tourist destination with no industry left if changes to antitrust policy are not made. He said the focus on regulation is driving Europe to last place and is driving Europe to irrelevance, which was why he believed it was on the way to becoming a museum. Great food, great architecture, great scenery, great wine, but no industry, no innovation, no tech, no progress, no growth. A stagnating museum. That's what regulations bring about. I mean, and the reason is clear. Regulations stifle the human mind. They restrict, they constrain. They basically limit what you can think, and therefore they limit new thought. They limit what you can do. So if you're going to do something, you go somewhere else. You move to America, you move anywhere. To avoid the stifling controls and use of physical force on the human mind, on our ability to think new thoughts, on the ability to grow a company to be successful. Success for Europeans means monopoly. I mean, for Lina Khan as well, for the Biden administration as well. Success equals monopoly. That is a recipe for stagnation. That is a recipe for irrelevance. That is a recipe for decline. For economic and ultimately a decline in every respect of your culture. All right, I've got some other stories. We will keep those for next time. I'll save this document and we will shift to doing the super chats, and then we'll talk about Tucker and Dugin. Tucker and Dugin. If you want, you can go on Twitter right now and let people know that I soon will be talking about Tucker and Dugin. Maybe that'll get some people to come and watch. And we will cover that in a little while. But first, thank you. Savannah's just put us over at least the goal for the first hour. As I said, hour goal are 250 an hour, which strikes me as pretty reasonable. And from Super Chat. So let's jump in with the Super Chats. I'll start with the $50. We've got two of them. The first one from James. James says, it used to be when the left felt threatened, they would go off the walls with their fear and hate. Now the right is just as bad. Remember when people on the right were considered measured adults from the country clubs and golf courses? Yes. And the reality is that the measured adults don't have a home anymore. The measured adults are holding their nose and voting one way or the other, but they don't belong anywhere. And what rules both left and right is emotionalism, panic, fear-mongering, and causing people to feel threatened. I find it really interesting. I get emails from both Democrats and Republicans raising money for their campaigns, right? And I noticed, and just random, I don't know how I got on the mailing list, but I'm on them, right? And I noticed a pattern that they all follow. Recently, I don't remember this in the past. The pattern is, I'm losing, the polls say I'm losing, help me, because if this other guy gets elected, the world will end, right? So they all present polls, even people running against each other. Like I get both sides in Arizona, and both sides are claiming to be losing in their fundraising campaigns, which is really interesting, right? That what motivates people to send you money as a politician is the fear of you losing and the other side winning, right? And the polls, I don't know if they're made up or they find a poll that shows whatever they wanted to show, but the whole drive of these campaigns is fear and negativity. And a lot of it, and this started like 3-4 months ago, so very early polls, which don't really matter to the final result. The election is only in November. And yet, oh no, he's ahead in the polls. Help me overcome the gap. Yeah, the adults in the room have left the building. I don't know where they are. I don't know where they're hiding, but they don't seem to be in our country anymore. I don't know where they are. Silvanos, thank you for the $50. Saudi Arabia line is the closest humanity will come to Arcology at the moment. Arcology, what does Arcology mean? Assuming it was built in a capitalist environment, would you live in such a dense population center? Well, first I would say it's not clear that under capitalism something like this would be built. That is, it's a chicken and egg thing, right, in capitalism. It never becomes so densely populated unless people want to live in a densely populated place. I mean, Hong Kong was very densely populated. But this is, I mean, somebody in the article I was reading from compared this, I think MBS actually said, this is going to be our pyramids, which is very indicative. Ayn Rand has this amazing essay, and God, I don't remember which book it's in, but I highly recommend looking for it. It might be available online for free. It's called The Monument Builders. And she talks about the fact that dictators, what are they interested in? They're interested in building monuments to themselves. They're not interested in productivity. They're not interested in enhancing the well-being of the people, because if they were, they wouldn't be dictators. They are interested in building monuments to themselves. So the monument builders, and they want the monuments to reflect how powerful they are, how great they are, how amazing they are. I mean, this is, if you think about virtue of selfishness, could be in the virtue of selfishness or capitalism, not an ideal. And this is exactly what the pyramids were, right? I mean, the pyramids were places where you got buried. You built them, and then you were buried when you died. They were monuments to you. And MBS, this is his pyramids. He wants this Lion City to be a testament to him, that thousands of years from now, people will discover these in the sand and hail great MBS who built this. Would anybody actually want to live in a city like this? I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. If I were building a city from scratch, I think I would build it in a circle, not in a line. It seems like in a circle, it's easier to get from place to place than in a line. I would maybe build it with a half circle, with much of the city facing the Red Sea. The Red Sea is beautiful. Why not have beachfront property? Mary Elaine has virtue of selfishness right in front of her. It's in virtue of selfishness, monument builders. Why would you build it in a line away from the sea? To get to the sea, I have to travel 105 miles. Now, it is true I'm going to have these really, really fast trains. But it's not the way anybody who would build a city organically. If you left this to developers and you say, okay, developers, we are going to grant you the land. We'll even subsidize part of the project. Go do what you want to do. Go do, imagine this yourselves. But this is MBS. This is a king. He's not king yet, but he will be. A king. Kings don't let people do what they want to do. Kings don't leave it up to the market, even when they're trying to establish more capitalism and more freedom in their country. They don't leave it up to the market. They regulate it, they control it, they design it, they specify every aspect of it. It's a monument to them, not a monument to a non-existent civilization, not something for the free market to determine, not something for, greedy developers to figure out. This is a monument to the king, the king. Right? And they will find other princes, other princes who they want to curry favor with or to align with them for the political battles of the future, and they will grant them the the juicy plots of land and so on. And wouldn't be surprised if the Bin Laden family, Osama Bin Laden, the Bin Laden family, which is a very powerful family involved in construction and real estate in Saudi Arabia, isn't part of constructing this, right? It's a family MBS wants on his side. I mean, this is so corrupt, and to think, and I just want you to grasp this, if nothing else. Here's a monarchy, a corrupt monarchy, centrally planned. And America's presidents, America, the greatest country in human history, the only country in human history founded on moral principle of individual rights, America's presidents go there and grovel on a regular basis. Regular basis. They go there and grovel. And, whether they bow or whether they dance or whatever it is that they do, they are groveling to the princes. And that's pathetic. And that's weak. And that's insane. I mean, the United States right now, imagine if the United States right now did this. This would crush Russia. It would crush Iran. And would actually reduce the power of Saudi Arabia significantly. Imagine if America did, this would be strategically brilliant. If America basically did this, it would say, we are lifting all restrictions on oil and gas manufacturing in the United States. Drill, baby, drill. Just go out there and do whatever you need to do. All constraints are lifted. Offshore, onshore, go and do it. You want to do it safely and cleanly, but do it. Just go drill. And all restrictions on exports and all restrictions on that. The price of oil would plummet. Price of oil plummeting really hurts the Russians. The price of oil plummeting really hurts the Iranians. The price of oil plummeting really hurts the Saudis, who can't afford this city, by the way. Particularly not if oil prices actually reflected how much oil the United States can produce if it's unleashed to do so. So, yeah, if we want to hurt our enemies, let's make oil really, really, really cheap. Because a big chunk of our enemies, Russia and Iran, receive all their funding from the export of oil and natural gas. I would even lift all the sanctions on Venezuela. Venezuela is not a threat to the United States. It's a horrible socialist regime that treats its people horribly. Not our business. Lift all the sanctions from Venezuela. Let them start pumping oil. We want oil to flood the market so that our real enemies, Russia, Iran. Now, this does help China. I grant that. Cheap oil helps China. But I'll take China over Russia any day. I think Russia is a much more real threat in terms of aggressiveness and megalomania and insanity than is China. So, let's do it and let's lift sanctions on anybody who produces oil except Iran and Russia. Lift sanction from all of them and then flood the market. Flood the market. And OPEC won't resist. They don't have the capacity given how much the United States can produce and how much the rest of the world can produce. Imagine. The other thing we should be doing is telling the Germans to turn on their nuclear power plants, telling the Canadians to start, producing more oil, build that stupid pipeline so that the Canadians can pump the oil to refineries that can actually use it. We should tell all the carbon, fossil fuel manufacturing, producing countries to ramp it up so that prices collapse, so that the bad guys, the evil access, again, primarily Iran and Russia, actually fail. There's a strategy for you. All right, a quick reminder that our sponsors, the Ayn Rand Institute, is encouraging people. Would love to see more people come to Okan. We'd love to see well over 500 people, maybe 1,000 people. So everybody listening to the Yaron Brook Show, imagine if all 5,000 or so people who watch or listen to every episode of the Yaron Brook Show actually showed up at Okan. I mean, wouldn't that be super amazing and thrilling? You can get a discount if you want to go to Okan. The discount is 24YBS10. 24YBS10. When you fill in an application, put that in, you'll get a 10% discount. Next year, I'm going to lobby to get that discount earlier in the year so you can start registering a lot earlier. Alex Epstein, I'll remind you, is a sponsor, Energy Talking Points, and Alex AI. These are things that anybody interested in energy, anybody interested in climate change and environmentalism must have. There is no better resource, no better information about these issues and how to deal with them and how to argue against the arguments of the other side, how to argue against corporate America, how to argue against the left, how to argue against people that place the so-called benefit, there is no such thing, of the environment over human beings. And Alex has nailed the way to argue against this, and that's what he does in the talking points. Luckily for us, there are some politicians who listen to him, and there are many CEOs who do. You could join them by signing up. alexepstein.substack.com. And then finally, I just mentioned, a big chunk of how I support the show and what makes it possible, it comes from those of you who support the show monthly. Most of those of you who support it monthly are not participating in the Super Chat. You listen to the show on podcast, or you listen to the show on YouTube, but later on, not live. And you are the bulk of the people. Again, we have live a certain percentage, but many multiples of that listen after the fact. It would be truly great if you guys ramped up your support of the show, particularly if you like this new format. If you like the 3-hour shows, please consider making a contribution. Patreon is probably the easiest way to do it, but if you prefer to use PayPal, you can do it on yaronbrookshow.com/membership. Yaron Brook Show. You can just go to yaronbrookshow.com, go to the website, and then press on the membership button, and you can become a supporter. But Patreon is just as easy. Just look up Yaron Brook Show, and please consider it. Anyway, you can be a sponsor of the show for $1,000 or anything less than that. But that is how we're going to fund this show. If I'm going to continue with this amount of content that producing, the funding is going to have to come from you guys. It's the only place it can come from, other than sponsorships. Also, if you would like to sponsor a show, a number of ways you can sponsor a show. If you'd like a product of yours to be sponsored on this show, I will consider it. Please email me what the product is. It has to be a product I would use and can honestly endorse. So consider that. VPN Express, for example, is a sponsor. And I do use VPN Express, so it's easy for me to sponsor it. But please consider doing that. You can contact me at yaronbrookshow.com. Or if you want to sponsor a particular topic, right? So topic sponsors, it's $1,000. Typically, we get 1 or 2 of those a month. But if you'd like to, if you've got an idea of what you would like to sponsor, a topic that you would like to see me talk about, I will devote at least an hour of a show to that topic. That is $1,000 to do that. Please consider doing that. Again, Yaron at yaronbookshow.com, and you can make the contribution on either Patreon or on PayPal. All right, let's go back to our Super Chat questions. Again, I'll remind you that these 3-hour shows, we need to raise about $750 for the whole 3 hours. If we can only raise $250, maybe I'll just cut them back to 1-hour shows, and that's all we will do. Remo says, how would you structure the election process of board members within a public company? I'm, for example, really disappointed that Nelson Peltz lost the proxy against Disney. I don't know. I haven't really given it any thought in terms of the actual election. Yuma1 says he's a freeloader. Yuma1, you can fix it right now by doing a sticker and stop being a freeloader. Stop being freeloaders, guys. You too can be a contributor in making this show possible. It really, ultimately, the show doesn't just happen. It happens because people are funding it. I don't know. How do you fund the show? How do you fund the show? How do you elect board members? A straight, one share, one vote system, I think. That is the way to do it. And, it's really pretty straightforward. I think it's just a straight, in a sense, democracy. Most decisions should be done by the board. You should be able to challenge those decisions with a vote in the board. You should be able to do a proxy fight, which is what Nelson Peltz did in doing that to replace the board of directors at Disney. But at the end of the day, the real problem with those is that a lot of institutional investors don't bother really thinking through how they vote, or they vote for political reasons. They don't vote for shareholder wealth maximization. What we should really be lobbying, what we should really be engaged in, right? What we should really be engaged in is trying to convince institutional investors that own a lot of stock of American companies to stop voting politically and to start voting for what makes sense from a business perspective. There's too much politics in shareholder voting. How do you fix that? I don't know how you fix that without changing people's minds. I just don't know that there's a mechanism to make it better. But I'm sure there are ways in which we could improve proxy voting, but and the attempt to replace a board of directors. I just don't have any ideas with regard to that. Sorry, Remo. All right, Harper Campbell. Is the left operating from a white man's burden complex? There are all these primitive brown people out there who need to be controlled and taken care of. And Israel isn't doing its duty coddling these noble savages. No, I don't think that's it. If that was it, it would actually be better than what they really are. I think that they approach this from an intersectionality perspective, from a post-colonial perspective. That is, Israel, because it is rich and powerful, and because it is perceived by them as white, even though most Israelis wouldn't qualify as being white by color alone or by national origin, what they perceive is that these people are, that Israel are the bad guys because they are successful. And it's not that they must coddle other people, right, of other skin colors. It's that they must utterly sacrifice for them. And even if that means disappear for their sake, even if that means die for them. Die for them. So it's much worse than, Israel should take care of the Palestinians. No, Israel must disappear for the Palestinians. Israel must become poor for the Palestinians. Israel must become weak for the Palestinians. It's complete. It's again, this is intersectionality. It's not just that in America whites don't take care of, let's say, blacks, which is, It's that whites need to subjugate themselves to blacks. They need to make themselves as poor, if not poorer than blacks. Only then will they achieve social justice. So this is pure evil, horrific egalitarianism. It's not that one group takes care of the other. That would reject egalitarianism. An evil form of rejection, but in rejection nevertheless. It's that one group should ultimately sacrifice themselves for the other in order to achieve equality. I happen to be of European origins, but my wife isn't. And I'd say over 51% of Israelis, maybe it's 50-50, are not from European origins. And skin color is not pure white, or whatever the hell that means. And Meerkat, should Israel pursue a policy of Swiss neutrality? Russia and China are hard no. They said, that being said, being allies with the U.S. is also dangerous. P.S. Gaaza must be destroyed. No, because I think it weakens Israel, right? Russia's undermining Israeli interests. It's undermining Israeli interests by working closely with Iran. So as bad as U.S. is, Russia's worse. China undermines Israeli interests, and Israel provides huge resources to China. Sadly, a lot of Chinese military technology is probably built on Israeli foundations, which is just horrible. And would that ever, turn around and be used against Israel? It could very well be. Could very well be. So, it's not in Israel's self-interest to help its enemies. And Russia and China, I think at the end of the day, Russia more so than China, are Israel's enemies. The United States is not. Now, should Israel have good relationships with European countries and other countries? Absolutely. But it does not help Israel long-term to be neutral when it comes to authoritarian, barbaric regimes like the Russian regime, for example. Adam, can't always join live at this time slot, but wanted to say thank you for combating the parasite brains and shit for brains in this crazy world. I appreciate that, Adam. And my guess is that I'm losing quite a few people who really like the evening shows and who just can't watch during the day because during the day they're working. Why are you guys not working, by the way? I'm just curious. All right, we got a first-time super chatter. Maybe that discussion of free riders that Yuma got started had an impact. I don't know. Thank you, iCarnivore, for your first super chat. And $20. I appreciate that a lot. Your stream is the product. The YouTube chat is the checkout lane. What biz allows non-customers to hover by the register and bash product and consumer? Earnest disagreement, fine. But here's a vote to ban high-volume agitators. I am becoming more and more sympathetic to that perspective as we go forward. The high-volume agitators are not there today. And life is a lot nicer and smoother, and doing this is a lot more fun with them not here. I don't know how you guys feel about this, the participants in the chat who are not high-volume, agitators. But there's a handful. There's probably 3 or 4 of them that, I think it's definitely worth considering banning them from the chat. I'm curious what you guys think. Ian says signal to noise ratio matter. I've quit a lot of online forums because of the amount of noise. Jennifer says I hate trolls. Kubaba says just block them. Edward says, do I agitate? No, sometimes you're very, very wrong, but I don't find you as obnoxious as some of these other guys. Jennifer says, yes, please. Again, 3rd time. Fender Hopper says, I'm an agitator's agitator. That doesn't help. Oivid said, I don't think you agitate, Ed. Leave them, but when they start insulting people, they have to leave. Yeah, that's tricky because then I need to assign a monitor who can actually make them leave. This is essentially Yaron Brook's living room. None is entitled to be here. I agree with that, absolutely. It's your platform, do as you wish, but at the risk of creating an echo chamber. I don't want to create an echo chamber, but I don't think that, again, there are only like 3 of them that they add any value. It really isn't. I have no problem. I have no problem, for example, with Edward, who disagrees with me in a lot of things. I have no problem with some of the others who disagree. Even Scott is marginal. He pisses me off, but he's not an agitator. But then there are the people who don't stop. Richard and what was the guy yesterday? Anyway, something I've really thought about. So thank you. I carnivore for the first super chat. I hope the first of many. Now that I clean up my living room, right? Maybe we'll get more people to participate in the super chat. All right. Michael says, how much is a country allowed to defend itself in an antitrust world, in an altruist world? Who knows? The whole point of an altruist world is there are no guidelines on how much. They cannot be how much, right? So, it is what it is. So, it depends on the mood of the others at that point in time, on how much you were offended. Israel was allowed to do some in the beginning and then reined in afterwards. That's why I told Israel, do it fast. Fast. Speed matters. Speed matters in life. Some things need to be done slow, and some things need to be done fast. All right, Liam, if standing up for yourself burns a bridge, I have matches. We ride at dawn. All right. Liam also says, no struggle, no progress. Keep it up, you're on. Thank you, Liam. Adam says, have you seen Miss Potter? It's a film about Beatrix Potter. It was an amazing sense of life. I highly recommend it. I think I have seen it. I really enjoyed it. It is a lot of fun. It is very benevolent, a great sense of life. Michael, why is it women should hero worship men and men shouldn't hero worship women? Well, it's less about men and women, and it's more about what categorizes femininity and masculinity. And again, this is Ayn Rand's definition. I don't know that I can explain it. I think it's much more psychological, and I think a lot of it has to come from introspection, and I can't introspect as a woman. But Ayn Rand posited or presented the idea that women are oriented, their psychological orientation, their feminine orientation. Again, it really depends on how feminine a woman is, and women can be less feminine than others. Women who are feminine are oriented towards a man. That is, men are stronger, particularly in more primitive societies. Women needed men to protect them. That is part of the reproductive purpose, part of reproduction. They need protection to be able to facilitate that. And as a consequence of all of that, they require some form of protection. So there's something embedded in the idea of femininity. It's not encoded in the gene, but it is something that a woman growing up psychologically develops to some extent or another. Some women don't develop to a lot less extent, and you can be a masculine woman. And when Ayn Rand was once called a man by accident, she said, thank you for the compliment. She thought that was a compliment. Anyway, Ayn Rand identified what differentiates men and women is femininity and masculinity, and psychologically. And that means that a woman is oriented towards a man, and a man is oriented towards reality. Now, she didn't explain it thoroughly. She didn't explain the psychological and the introspective basis for this. That work needs to be done by a psychologist, by people thinking about this. I don't think it can be done by the current crop of people who think it's all genetic, or the kind of crop that think that we're all fluid in our gender identity. I think it has to be done by an objectivist, or somebody with objective principles about human psychology and about and does the research about femininity, masculinity, and really can come up with theory of this, a theory that can stand up to the science, to the extent that there is science in psychology. Quint, thank you for the sticker. Really appreciate that. Rafael came through with a $20 question. Let's say leptons are the universe's eternal building blocks. How can something exist without a beginning? And volition don't have a cause, but is a particular type of cause. Is there other examples of types of causes? First, I don't know why something has to have a beginning. That is, all you have to say is the universe is eternal. And indeed, it can't have a beginning. Because by saying universe, you're saying everything that exists, everything that did exist, and everything that will exist. And that can't start somewhere. Indeed, the whole concept of time, the whole idea of time, assumes existence. So, to the extent that there is time, it is only within the universe. It's only once existence exists. It's only once leptons are there. And leptons have always existed. And we measure the time that has passed inside the lepton universe, whatever you want to call it, right? So no, the whole point is, metaphysically, it cannot have a beginning. And indeed, every atom in the universe that ever was is still here, and that what's composed, the material reality. Now, volition is a type of cause. There are lots of types of causes. Indeed, you have to get away from the billiard ball explanation of cause and effect. The cause of a billiard ball going in a particular direction is not the other billiard ball hitting it. The cause is its nature. Its nature is a round thing that, if hit in a particular point, will roll in that particular direction. But the cause is the thing itself, the nature of the entity. The cause of free will is the nature of human consciousness. It's just, this is what human consciousness does. This is its nature. Now, cause is not about explaining things in terms of their physics. Can we explain life in terms of physics? We cannot. We have no explanation for life in terms of physics. Do we have explanation for consciousness in terms of physics? Never mind free will. No. We have no explanation for consciousness in terms of physics. And yet, consciousness and life exist. We know they exist. And we know they're causal. They came from somewhere. And the same thing is true of free will. We know it exists. We don't know the physics of it, but so what? We don't know the physics of a lot of things. Do we know the physics of gravity? No, we don't know what causes gravity. But there it is. It's there. It's in the nature of objects that they have gravitational pull. There's another cause for you. Right? The cause of gravity is the nature of bodies with mass. I think that's right, if I remember my physics right. All right, Rafael, I don't know if that's satisfying. It's the best I have. You can ask a philosophy of science when we have him on. Probably the best would be somebody like Harry Ben Swingham. Okay, Clark. Would you say Millei has been a success so far? Yeah, I think so. I think he's done what he can. I mean, I think the limitations on Millei so far don't seem to be, to the extent that I understand it, Millei himself, but the restrictions being placed on him by the politics of Argentina, by the parliaments, by the courts that have restricted what he can actually do. But I think what he's proposed and what he's done so far and what has actually passed them has been good. All right, Jennifer says, polite, respectful disagreement is one thing. Dishonest, rude trolls are another. Thank you for making the decision to address this issue. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate the support. Yeah, I haven't decided exactly how to address it and who qualifies, but I very much think that what's his name yesterday crossed the line. So he's not here today. Harper Gamble, I enjoy when you tell all the idiots on the chat, who told you to stop and ignore them? Well, I mean, you enjoy it because you're here live listening, but I mean, there are two things that tell me. One, I have a lot of people on the who listen to this as a podcast, who don't watch it live, who don't see the chat, and it's distracting. I'm off on a topic, and suddenly I veer to address some idiot online. I get why they don't like it. And then the other thing is people on the chat itself, it's like they tend to dominate it so that the actual good people, the people who might want to actually have a discussion about something or might want to comment on it, actually, find themselves not wanting to participate in the chat because the idiots are there and they're dominating the whole thing. Now, I have to admit, I enjoy going after them, but I only enjoy going after them if they're there. If they're not there, I don't miss it. Right? I don't miss it. I like putting them in a place. I like making fun of them, but if they're not there, then it's even better. Then we can just focus on the positive, focus on the points of view. And if you have legitimate points of disagreement and legitimate points of challenging me in the super chat, for example, then that's great. I love that. Please do that. One big business neck to shackle. That's right, Mary Eileen. I mean, this relates to the idea that government doesn't want competition. It wants big business because big business is easier to shackle. Just one. I don't have to shackle 25. It's harder to shackle 25 than one big one. Mary Eileen, who gets to decide what's a lie and what's an error? How have bureaucrats ever been experts? The acquisition and growth of knowledge requires freedom. Yeah, I mean, only you as an individual can decide what is an error and what is a lie. It is none of their business. Who gets to decide who is an error, what is a lie, and what is truth? What is truth? God forbid, again, that the government gets into the business of telling us what is truth. You remember Biden wanted to appoint a truth commission? A commission that would ban misinformation based on their standard of truth? That didn't last very long, luckily. But just the fact that that idea would be raised by anybody in government is truly horrifying, truly horrifying. So absolutely, people should be able to spout whatever nonsense they want, not on my channel, but anywhere else they want. And the government has no business. You can turn them off, you can block them, you can cancel them, canceling is fine. I have no problem with canceling people, but it has to be voluntary. It has to be done by the platform or by individuals, not by the government. Robert, YBS freedom. My solution to the so-called problem of free riders is to not be one and to be productive enough that I don't have to care about them. Yeah, I'm eager to get to a point where I don't have to care about them, but we're still about, I'd say, 33% away from the point where I don't have to care about them. That is, if income from YBS, all the YBS stuff, all the places in which I get income was 33% higher, then I would stop caring about the free riders. But we're not quite there. We need to get this platform self-sustaining, which means sustaining me, granted. But that's what self-sustaining means. It means to a point where it produces enough income for me to live off of. That's the standard, and it's about 2/3 of the way there. And I think the best way, if you want to help that happen, for this to be self-sustaining and never have to worry about, for me, never have to worry about funding with regard to this show, that is to become a monthly contributor on one of the platforms. And those of you who can afford it, if you can become a monthly contributor at $100 or $250 or $500, as some of you are, that's where you really have an impact. $2 matters, but the 100, 250, 500, those people matter hugely. If we get enough of those, we close that 1/3 gap pretty quickly, and we can get this. So please consider, if you're not yet a supporter, to support the show. Please consider, if you are a supporter, but the show is actually valuable to you and you could do more, to do more. I'd incredibly appreciate that. Quent, how did Christianity bring down the Roman Empire? Oh, God, that's a big question, Quent, but thank you. How did it bring down the Roman Empire? It made it weak. As I have said before, Christianity is a religion of weakness. It's a religion of catering to the poor. It's a religion of celebrating the meek and the weak, and it's not a religion of strength. It's not a religion of power. So, the Roman Empire embraces a welfare state. The Roman Empire loses its, if you will, confidence in its fight, in its superiority, in the justice of its cause. As many of the barbarian tribes become Christian. The reality is that Rome was sacked by Christian barbarians, right? The Goths and many of those tribes were Christian by this point. And they become more Christian as we go on in time. It becomes more difficult to fight. What are we fighting for? Is it legit for Christian emperor to fight other Christians? For what? What are we? Now, again, this goes in within Christian theology. This goes up and down in terms of the influence of it. But it weakens the resolve. Roman law. Is Roman law just? Based on Christian principles. So everything about what established the Roman Empire is now undermined by a new philosophy that has different standards and has a different approach to every aspect of life. And it caused everybody to question, should we be doing this? Is this worth fighting for? Now, Roman Empire also becomes corrupt and nihilistic and hedonistic because in some of it embraces Christianity, other parts of it, they don't like Christianity, but they don't have anything alternative. So you could say it's Christianity plus a void of good philosophy, good ideas, good values that kills Rome. It's that combination. But Christianity is a big chunk of that. Mary Elaine, I think there are men who hero worship certain women. Certainly that's true. Some women are worthy of it, and it takes a man of self-esteem to recognize it. I think that's absolutely right. Again, what we're talking about here is a psychological orientation that defines femininity and masculinity, not a something all women should be or all men should be, and you should measure yourself based on. Again, it defines one characteristic of an individual, his level of masculinity or femininity, but that doesn't mean that defines every aspect, or it doesn't even mean you have to maximize any one of these things, right? There are men who are more feminine, less feminine. There are women who are more masculine, less masculine. And there's nothing wrong with it. Don't suppress who you are and what you are. We're not all the same. Oyvind Sundek, what is your thoughts on the Copenhagen interpretation? I think it might show that small particles has some form of primitive free will. It's an area where I think Harriman and Peikoff misinterprets. Well, I think it's a problem if they have free will, right? Because they don't have consciousness. How can you have free will without consciousness? So who is the agent that has the will? So I don't think that's it. But I don't have an interpretation of the Copenhagen interpretation, right? I don't have thoughts about it. Basically, I don't know. I mean, quantum mechanics, it is what it is. The experimental evidence is what it is. The math works. They're building a quantum computer. It works. And now the question is, how do we interpret what it works? I don't think I don't think saying the particles have free will solves the problem. It just now whitewashes or distorts what free will is. It makes it more difficult to figure that out. But it might turn out that our Newtonian perspective on kind of causation, material causation, is wrong. It could be that at the subatomic particle, it works differently, right? So, Oivid said what he really meant to say is he's open to them having free will, or that he will not exclude the possibility. But who is they? What is the thing that is thinking if they're not conscious and they're not alive? As far as I know, you cannot have consciousness without life. And it doesn't seem like you can have free will without consciousness and life. So I don't know how you do that. But there are other interpretations of quantum mechanics. There's some objectivist physicists who've got interpretations of it. There's others. I think Bell, I can't remember who, Bohr maybe. Anyway, there were other physicists who had interpretations of quantum mechanics that weren't the same as the Copenhagen interpretation. And I don't have an opinion. I'm not a physicist. I think that's generally healthy. Generally, physics has to abide by the laws of existence exists, the law of causation, the law of identity. Other than that, how exactly it all works out, I'll leave that to people who are interested, much more interested and much more able and much smarter than I am in terms of what that is. Iron Milcut says, please don't violate my First Amendment right. I know you mean it as a joke, but it's important to note that you have no First Amendment right on my platform, in my home, on my show, on my property. The First Amendment only applies to your property, to your show, and even then, if the show is hosted by YouTube, you don't have a First Amendment right to say anything that YouTube doesn't think you should say. So your First Amendment right is only expressed. It can only be violated by the government, and censorship is something only government can do, and it's only about what you do on your own property, or property that you've leased, or property you've rented, under the right conditions, but not on, and public property shouldn't exist. So there is no such thing in public. If it's in public, but if it's somebody's private property, yeah, right. If the roads are owned, the people who own the roads can limit what you say on those roads. All right. Let's see. Oivind said the wave could have an extreme form of consciousness. It just seems, it just seems contradictory. It just doesn't. I don't buy it, and I don't know the waves. I don't know the waves really exist independent of particles, and I don't know all of that stuff. And I think speculating about it, unless you're a physicist, it doesn't add anything. Doesn't get you anywhere. All right, we are unanswered, copied to the clipboard. I'm pressing the wrong thing. Okay. Yes, we're over halfway of where we should be, right? But we still have a way to go for this last hour, or this last hour and a bit. So to the extent that there are people out there who would like to support the show, thank you, Paul, for the sticker. Please consider doing so in the next hour. Okay, Shally, I'll take Shally's question, and then we'll turn to Tucker Carlson's interview of Dugin. Shally says, do you know of the Estonian YouTuber Tick? He seems to have been heavily influenced by Dr. Piekoff and objectivism in general. in the way he approaches his explaining of history. I've seen the video you're referring to. I would like, if anybody has any in with Tick, I would love to invite him on the show to talk about this transformation he went through and his discovery of objectivism and Peikoff and his view of history more broadly. So so if you have any in with him, please write to him and see if you can write to me, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. I will also, how do you approach him? Okay, so Maurice, if you know that he is approachable, do you mind writing to him and saying that I would love to interview him? Would he be interested? And if so, could he write me at Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com? That would be the easiest thing to make it, if we're going to make it happen. All right, hate to do this to you guys, but I'm going to anyway. All right, so it turns out when Tucker was in Moscow, he didn't just do the interview with Putin. Who knows who else he talked to, but it turns out that he wanted to meet Dugin. He wanted to meet Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin is a character, I've talked about him on the show in the past, is a character that the far right in the United States, the crazy right in the United States, really admires and respects. Even Jordan Peterson has said, I wouldn't say nice things about him, but has referred to him as a real philosopher. I think he's a real hack, but anyway, or a real bad philosopher, real evil philosopher. Anyway, Tucker Carlson wanted to meet him. It turns out that when he met him, he realized, ooh, this guy's really interesting, and I'll tape a short interview. So he taped a 20-minute interview with Dugin. Dugin speaks in English in this interview. He often speaks in Russian. I've done a number of shows, a couple of shows, I think, on Dugin. This guy is a real witch doctor. He is a mystic. He is, you'll see, a real collectivist. He is a hater of the West and particularly the Enlightenment of the West, in the West, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. He is a medievalist, if we can call him that. He is an advocate for Russian Empire and an advocate for violence, an advocate for war. His daughter, I reported this on the show at some point, his daughter was assassinated by Ukraine. They probably were trying to kill Dugin and killed her accidentally, but she was a piece of work too. She was a huge supporter of Russia's attack on Ukraine, a real hater of Ukraine, a real spread of propaganda against Ukraine. So in that sense, from the Ukrainians' perspective, I'm sure no great loss that they missed Dugin and got her. Tucker is outraged by the idea that she was killed by Ukraine because, as he says, as you'll see him say, Dugin is just a philosopher. He's just a philosopher. He's just a philosopher. Why would you be afraid of a philosopher? Which is interesting, right? The role of ideas. But Dugin is very influential. He's treated as a real celebrity among many elements within the American right. He's treated as a real celebrity among many elements of the European right. He's a real traditionalist. Again, a medievalist. As I said, a medievalist. He really wants, from a values perspective, to go back. And I wasn't going to do this, but I listened to the interview, and particularly the first few minutes of it are so striking. Dugin is so explicit. And I think in a way that surprises Tucker, he's so explicit about what he thinks the enemy is. What the enemy really is, that I thought you should listen, because to really understand the new right, to really understand where the new right is heading, where the worst elements on the right are, I think it's worth understanding what people like Dugin hate about the West. What is it that really pisses them off? What is it that really upsets them? Okay. You can still ask questions in the Super Chat. Remember, you guys make this show possible. You can support the show with a sticker. You know, everybody doing $4 right now would actually get us to the target, get us to where we need to be. And you can also ask questions on this topic or any topic. I will leave time at the end to answer questions. I will make sure that we go as long as we need today to answer every one of your questions as needed. But let's go to Tucker Carlson interview with Dugin, and I'll be commenting on it.
What's interesting is that once again, Alexander Dugin is not a military leader.
Yeah, I mean, Tucker's shocked by the idea that people think that a philosopher is threatening. When we, I think, hopefully you, I certainly do, we understand that military leaders, political leaders, they are in some senses, I wouldn't say pawns because they have free will, but they are driven by philosophers. Philosophy is the cause. Philosophy is what drives history. Philosophy is what drives military leaders. If you want to be afraid of something, be afraid of philosophers. They will shape the future. They are the ones who inspire the military leaders. By the way, thank you, Mary Aline, for 2 stickers. 2 stickers, I really, really appreciate that. All right, so let's keep going.
He's not a close daily advisor to Vladimir Putin.
Ideas don't work in a way that you have to be a close daily advisor.
He is a writer who writes about big ideas.
Yeah, that's who changes the world, for better or for worse. And
for this, his books have been banned by the Biden administration in the United States. You cannot buy them on Amazon.
Now, so I don't know that claim. I try to research it a little bit, and it turns out that this claim that the Biden administration has banned the books of Alexander Dugin, and as a consequence, you can't find them on Amazon, has only been made, as far as I can tell, by Tucker and people citing Tucker. I haven't seen any actual evidence that this is true. Now, what is true is that you cannot find Dugin's books in English on Amazon, except one of his books, I think, is on Kindle version. You can find them on Amazon in Russian. And you can find a lot of his books in secondhand bookstores online in the US that are available, and I'll ship them to you. But you cannot find them new on Amazon, books he authored, except for the one on Kindle. Now, I don't know why that is. I find it very hard to believe that the Biden administration banned them. That is a clear violation of the First Amendment. Maybe they worked to convince Amazon to take them off, and maybe Amazon did a partial job of taking some stuff off and leaving the ones that got left off, like his books in Russian, which you can buy on Amazon. Something similar is on Barnes & Noble, although it seems like there you can find Alexander Dugin's books in German. It's also possible that Dugin's books are out of print in English, and that's why they're in German and Russian. You can buy them there. I just don't know. So Tucker is saying the Biden administration banned the books in the United States. I'm pretty sure that's false, but that's typical of Tucker taking something marginal, maybe not, and just declaring it absolutely without question. Biden administration banned it. I know that, and that's why Amazon doesn't carry it, without even considering kind of why isn't anybody suing around that. That's a clear First Amendment violation.
Banning books in the United States because the ideas inside are too dangerous. He's often described, again in the English language press, as far right. We'll let you assess, but we wanted to talk to him about some of his ideas, these ideas that are so dangerous that his only daughter was murdered over them, and his book's been banned in the United States.
Remember, ideas are unbelievably dangerous. They're what motivates all bad guys. They're that motivates Hitler, they motivated Stalin, Stalin was a communist, they motivated Putin. They motivate Xi. They motivate many. I mean, without ideas, none of these regimes would survive.
And so we're happy to have him join us now. Mr. Dugin, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and welcome to Moscow.
Of course, thank you. So we were talking off camera. Actually, we were having a conversation that we were not going to film. Just interested to meet you. But what you said was so interesting that we got a couple of cameras and put this together. And my question to you was, what do you think is happening in the English language countries? And I said, all of them. United States, Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand, Australia, all at once decided to seemed to turn against themselves. And you had this great turmoil and some of the behaviors seem very self-destructive. And where do you think, as an observer, that comes from?
So pay attention here, because he lays it out. He tells you exactly where it comes from. So where do all the problems in the West come from? And Dugin, like Putin, when Tucker interviewed Putin, and Putin went 200 years, what was it? More than 200 years. He went way into the history and started telling him about history. Dugin does exactly the same thing. He says, this is going to take a while, and he goes into history. And and notice what he pinpoints as the cause of all the West's problems.
So I could just suggest, express my reading of that. It demands a little patience. So I think that everything started with individualism.
There you go. Everything started with individualism. Now, when he says everything, he doesn't mean good stuff. He means the problems, the bad stuff, the difficulties. Everything started with individualism. Right? Individualism is not the solution. Individualism is the problem. You don't like individuals. And if you don't believe me, well, keep listening, right? And notice how he said, you're going to need some patience because this is going to be long, he says, right? And it's a history lesson.
So individualism, that was a wrong understanding of the human nature.
So individualism is a wrong understanding of human nature. We're not fundamentally individuals. We shouldn't be concerned about own interests. That is not a primary concern, and pursuing our own values. And we shouldn't set up political systems that protect individuals to pursue their life, their values, their ideas. That was the mistake. That's the turning point that the left went off, that the left got into trouble. I'm sorry, not the left, the West got into trouble.
The nature of man. When you identify individualism with the man, with the human nature, you cut all the relations to everything else. So you have very special idea of the subject, philosophical subject, as individual. And everything started in the Anglo-Saxon world with Protestant reform and with nominalism. Before that, nominalist attitude that there are no ideas, only things, only individual things. So individual.
So he blames the Reformation, right? He blames, again, the Reformation was the idea. And think about what he's blaming here. He's blaming a Christian movement that basically said, we don't rely on authority. We don't rely on a chain of command to interpret God, to communicate with God, to tell us what God means. Every individual can read. Every individual can read the Bible, can read God's word. Every individual can interpret it, and we should not rely on the authority of a Catholic Church in order to do that, right? In order to do that. So he's basically saying the problem with the West is when it became too individualistic. And of course, nominalism is wrong. He's right about that. But here's a guy who is explicitly, unapologetically identifying the source of all the West's problems, the origin of all the conflicts we have in the West with individualism. Now, note that you don't get a comeback of saying, well, isn't individualism also the source of all our, all the good stuff that we have, all the technology, all the wealth, all the positive things that we have. You don't get that. Individualism is the source of the problems. And the source of individualism, in his mind, is the Reformation. And the Reformation is because the Reformation gave the individual, stated the individual has the ability to communicate with God. Remember, Dugin is very religious. Dugin is Christian Orthodox. Christian Orthodox is like Catholic, it is the Eastern equivalent of Catholicism. It's very hierarchical. The Christian Orthodox leader, Pope, is the equivalent of a pope, is the equivalent of the guy who communicates with God and lets us all know. We don't get to make decisions for ourselves. Note that he says that individualism cuts us off from everything. Cuts us off from everything. Because the way they view individualism is, and the way they purposefully distort individualism to present individualism, is they present individualism as atomistic, as nominalism, as separate, but the reality is that individualistic cultures are the most cooperative. And indeed, much of the production, much of the wealth creation, much of the scientific discoveries in individualistic cultures happens through voluntary cooperation. What individualism rejects, without question, is authoritarianism, is the imposition of knowledge of authority on the individual. What it rejects is the idea that the individual should not be free to pursue his own cooperation.
It was the key and is still key concept that was put in the center of liberal ideology. And liberalism, as in my reading, it is a kind of historical and cultural and political and philosophical process of liberation of individual of any kind of collective identity.
Yeah, he's right. Liberalism is the liberation of the individual from any kind of collective identity, any kind of collective authority. It's the liberation of, and liberalism here, we're talking about the classical liberal sense, right? The classical liberal. Now, he's, by the way, much more humble here than he usually is. It's like, I think, this is my interpretation. Usually, he doesn't come across as that. But so he's identifying liberalism with individualism with the idea of liberation from collective identity and, by the way, collective authority. And he's right. But that's what he thinks is bad. That's what he thinks is bad. And again, the only reason I'm showing you this is not because I picked some crazy Russian off the street, but because Tucker views him as worthy of interview, and because the American right and many American podcasters and others love this guy. I mean, he has been regularly, at least before the war, in Hungary. Orban loves him. The Hungarian right, the European right loves him. And the American right, the new American right loves him. So it's important we understand where they're coming from. And if you only remember one thing, the new right is anti-individualism, anti-classical liberalism, anti the founding fathers, anti the Declaration of Independence, which is a document of individualism, individual rights, which is the ultimate manifestation of individualism in politics, right? This is what the new right worships. This is what the rising European right and the rising American right, this is what they believe in. So the American right today, you think of the American right as the historical conservatives who love the founders, who think they understand individual rights, who think they support individual rights, who think they're pro-individual, pro-capitalism. He's unmasking them. He's saying, no, to be truly right is to be anti-individualism and pro-collectivism. Pretty explicit here.
Collective or that transcends individual. And
so it's to liberate the individual for anything that transcends him, like God. I'm all for that. That's cool.
That started with refuse of Catholic Church as collective identity,
Yep, as I said.
of empire, Western Empire as collective identity.
Notice Western Empire, right? So this guy's pro-empire, particularly the Russian Empire. He likes the Russian Empire. So this is about the rejection. You know, one of the things that individualism led to, God forbid, is not only rejection of the Catholic Church, but the rejection of Western Empire.
After that, it was a revolt against a national state as collective identity in favor of purely civil society. After that, there was a big fight of the 20th century between liberalism, communism, and fascism, and liberalism has won once more.
Yes.
So, and after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was only liberalism, and Francis Fukuyama has pointed out correctly that there are no more any ideologies except of liberalism. And
Now, notice a trick he does, and a trick that the left does, right? He's forgotten about classical liberalism now, and now liberalism is everything in the West, right? So liberalism, in this view, has no meaning. Also, when he talked about human nature before, notice that he never actually mentions the one thing that at least we think constitutes human nature. The one thing that he thinks he doesn't mention is reason, rationality. Man is the rational animal. He talks about individualism as implying whatever the individual wants, thinks, feels, whatever. And this becomes more important later on, where he drifts into, well, now individualism leads us to, well, we can choose our own gender. And we, in other words, now in the next phase, he says, is we can choose not to be human. And he talks about transhumanism. But all of that is nonsense, because individualism requires a means by which the individuals survive. And the means by which individuals survive is reason. You cannot split individualism from reason. Now, I don't know what the problem is with transhumanism, right? I mean, is it that much of a problem if we stay individualists, we keep our mind, we keep our reason, and yet we enhance our physical abilities? We improve our genetic makeup. We use chips and robotic arms to make us stronger, or a chip in our brain to access the internet more immediately. So, but he's against that, because that's playing God. That's too focused on the individual. So notice what he emits, and what he will emit throughout this interview. I don't know if we'll play the whole thing, but throughout the interview, what he emits throughout the interview is reason. And then what you're left with is modern far-left crazies, which, according to him, are individualists, but we all know they're not individualists, right? Those pro-Hamas people, are they individualists? No. They're mindless collectivists. They're just following a collective he doesn't agree with. Are the transgender advocates individualists? Or do we have a collectivistic agenda? Oh, they clearly have a collectivistic agenda, and they act like it. They're little authoritarians. They don't respect anybody other than their own kind. So once you make individualism equals whim worship, once you make individualism equal atomistic, once you make individualism divorce it from reality, that is, from the need to adhere to reality, which is what you would do if you include reason in it, then yeah, then what you get is crazy stuff. But is that really what individualism actually means? He's a philosopher, he should know.
Liberalism, that was liberation of this individual from any kind of collective identity. There were only two collective identities to liberate from. Gender identity, because it is collective identity. You are man or woman collectively. So you.
Yeah, but that's so bizarre, right? Do you really think of feminine, masculine, male, female, as collective? Is the fact that I identify as a man, is that in some way joining me with other men? Isn't it just an identification of reality? But this is the sense in which, what he's saying is gibberish. There's no collective identity as a man. By the way, one of the things that's interesting about Dugin is that he is he's a postmodernist. That is, he as an adherent of a postmodernist philosophy. From the right, usually postmodernism is something that comes from the left. He's from the right, embraces postmodernism. And that might involve some of the loose and crazy way in which he uses these terms. But there is no collectivism of men. I mean, there might be, right? I think those, there used to be a long time ago, I haven't seen this in a long time, but they are now. I think the manosphere is pretty collectivistic. Oh, we're men, and this is how you pick up women, this is how you treat women, and this is how you do this. I mean, there's a definite authoritarian streak there. I think that there used to be these men clubs. They used to go and beat on drums and do manly things together. Yeah, I mean, it can become that. But does me identifying as a man mean I have a collective identity? No, I have an identity. If I identify as an American, does that make me a collectivist? No. I'm an American individual. I'm an individual within this geographic political entity called America. It's really so, I don't know, concrete bound. It's so, if somehow you belong to a group, by belonging to a group, you then are collectivist. You have a collective identity. Something very, very wrong about that, right?
You could not be alone. So liberation from gender, and that has led to transgenders, to LGBT, and new form of sexual individualism. So sex is something optional. And that was not just...
So notice, what he's really describing is a negation of reality. Now, he can get there because he's abandoned reason, because he doesn't identify human beings as being rational, i.e. connected to reality. That's what rationality means, connected to reality. And reality is that I am a man. I can't choose out of nowhere to be something different than that. So, maybe some people, the reality is they're mixed or something like that. But for me, it's pretty clear, right? But see how cleverly he's now made it all about individualism? Transgenderism is about individualism, and yet when you look at the transgender movement, you don't get individualism at all. You get very much a collectivistic dictates of a movement. And really, if I had identified the problem of why America is in decline, why the West is in decline, is the rise of collectivism. A different form of collectivism, a new form of collectivism. It's not communist, it's not fascist, it's authoritarian, leftist, nihilistic egalitarianism, but it's still a new form of collectivism, not of something different.
Deviation of liberalism, that was necessarily elements of implementation and the victory of this liberal ideology. And the last step that is not yet totally totally made is liberation from human identity, humanity optional. And when now we are choosing, or you in the West, you are choosing the sex you want, as you want. And the last step in this process of liberalism, implementation of liberalism, will mean precisely the human optional. So you can choose your individual identity to be human, not to be human. And that has a name: transhumanism, posthumanism, singularity, artificial intelligence, Klaus Schwab, Kurzweil, or Harari. They openly declare that is inevitable future of humanity. So we arrive.
Notice how he sticks artificial intelligence in there. He sticks all new technology in there, and we're going to arrive at a point where we can declare ourselves non-human. And the next step is evolve out of our humanity.
To the historical terminal station that we finally, 5 centuries ago, we have embarked in this train, and now we are arriving at the last station. So that is my reading. And when all the elements, all the phases of that, you cut the tradition with the past.
Yeah, and that's really, really important to him, is the cutting of tradition, the elimination of tradition, the elimination of the authoritarianism of that traditional past.
So you are no more Protestant, you are secular, atheist, materialist.
That has nothing to do with reality. I'm an atheist because I'm reality. It has to do with I'm rejecting the past. Therefore, I'm a secular. I mean, it's just a weird way. It's such a strained, divorced from reality way of looking at the world from the standpoint of truth is in the tradition. And everything else is, of course, a rejection of that truth.
You are no more nation state that served to liberate from empire, and now national state becomes at its turn obstacle. You are liberating from national state.
Notice how this is interesting, because the first time I've noticed this. He talks about empire. The state liberated us from empire, and he talks about it, I think this is important, as if empire was good. Empire was the right way. And think about what empire he's really referring to. What empire is this really relating to? He's really relating to the Russian Empire, right? Right now, Putin's goal is the resurrection of the Russian Empire, of a new Russian Empire. And that's Dugin. That's Dugin's ideology. The ideology of empire. Indeed, the nation state was to move away from the ideal. The ideal was the Roman Empire, the Russian Empire, the what do you call it? The Roman Holy Empire, right? In the 13th, 14th centuries, or starting even in the 10th century, the Holy Roman Empire. Empire is the real, what we really should strive for. This atomization, which has to do with individualism and it leads us to the nation state, he rejects that, right? He rejects that. And again, this is consistent. This is consistent with Russia going to war in order to try to expand and really establish a Russian empire. And that's what I've been telling you. Ultimately, really, deep down, motivates, not so deep down because he says it, Putin and the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine is not about NATO. The war in Ukraine is about the desire, the necessity of a Russian empire.
Finally, family is destroyed in favor of this individualism. And the last things, the sex that is already almost overcome, sex optional, and in gender politics, there is only one step to arrive to the end of this process of liberation, of liberalism. That is the abandoned human identity as something prescribed. So to be free from to be human, to have the possibility to choose to be or not to be human. And that is the agenda, political, ideological agenda of the tomorrow. That is why how I see Anglo-Saxon world that you have asked of, I think that is just the vanguard of this process, because that started with Anglo-Saxons empirism, nominalism, Protestantism, and now you are ahead as Anglo-Saxon, more devoted to liberalism than any other European.
So what you're describing.
So that's the thing, that's the point. Everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. Once you accept individualism as whim worship, once you accept that individualism is atomistic, once you accept that reason, rationality have nothing to do with this. Now, somebody like Dugin is a Platonist. He is a rejecter of reason and rationality, at least as we understand it, right? And as a consequence, right? As a consequence, he is, whoops. All right, it looks like YouTube has suspended my this stream. As a consequence, we will call it a day here. I really have said everything I wanted to say, I think, about Dugin, and I will try to figure out what YouTube has done. Maybe I'm not supposed to be using this video from Tucker Carlson. Maybe I'm violating a copyright. That, I guess, is possible. That might be the cause. I think I'm still streaming on X. I think I'm still streaming on Facebook, but they stopped the stream on YouTube for some kind of policy violation. So, and we're still streaming on the podcast. So I will call it here. We've got 3 questions in the super chat. I will leave those for next show. Tomorrow, don't forget tomorrow, 2 p.m. It's easy now because every week is the same thing. We will go forward. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Whoops, it looks like I'm back. Is that possible? Do you guys see video? I'm back. So somebody reviewed the policy violation and brought me back. I have no idea what it is. No idea what it is. But that was weird. That's never happened to me before on YouTube. I mean, I was speculating that the issue was a copyright violation of Tucker, and Tucker was, somebody complained, or some algorithm figured out that I was violating somebody's something. I don't know, but it's back. So whatever they found, they undid, and we're back on. So, and I was gonna stop it there. Anyway, so because that's what I wanted you to see. I wanted you to see the consequence, and you'll note that today, so much of the right, and I actually need to do a show on this. So much of the right now is attacking the Enlightenment. I mean, I include here Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and others. Jordan Peterson, who used to defend the Enlightenment and maybe still does in some way, but they're attacking the Enlightenment, and what are they attacking the Enlightenment primarily for? They're primarily attacking the Enlightenment over the fact that the Enlightenment promoted individualism. That is, this issue of what is individualism, this issue of whether individualism is important, what is the value of individualism, is going to be the issue as we fight against the right, but also as we fight against the left. Because what we don't want is the left to take the mantle of individualism. The left is not individualistic, and we don't want anybody out there in the culture to associate individualism with the left. Individualism is the idea of man guided by his own reason, that the truth is accessible to man, that man as an individual should and can pursue his own happiness, that the individual should and can choose his own values, and that therefore as a state, the role of the state is to protect him from force so that he can choose his own values in pursuit of his own happiness. That's what individualism means. It doesn't mean ignore reality and pursue one's whim. And it is, you know, and I know Dugin despises this, but it is individualism to say, I identify that I am gay, and therefore, I'm attracted to X. That is part of the liberty, the freedom that individuals should have. And I know these people are obsessed with sex and sex being what it always has been. But, you know, this is the fight that we have, because the fight that we have is both with left and right. And it's very much about the nature of man. It's very much about, are we a rational animal? It's very much about what does it mean to be an individual, and what is the responsibility that comes with being an individual. And the right doesn't get it, and the left obviously doesn't get it. We're it. All right, let's see. We got just 3 super chats. So if you want to ask a question about anything, or if you want to support the show, in spite of YouTube's attempt to shut it down, please, show your support here in the super chat. It's a great way to show the support. Let's see. Let's start with I'm Meerkat. What justifies targeting an enemy witch doctor who isn't a combatant? Why is it okay during war, but not in peacetime? P.S. Gaaza must be destroyed. I mean, if you're at war, then you must disable the enemy by any means. And if one of the things that feeds the enemy are intellectuals, then kill the intellectuals. If one of the things that feeds the enemy are people working in the farms and therefore feeding the enemy, then burn the farms. Your job is not to figure out, your job in a war, you're not assigned to kill only combatants. Your only job is to win. And what you must do is do whatever is necessary to win as quickly as possible with the least casualties to your side. I mean, General Sherman during the Civil War understood this. So he went behind enemy lines to the south. He basically burnt Atlanta. And then he went straight from Atlanta to Savannah, pretty much, or Charleston, I think Savannah first, straight line, and burnt all the farms between Atlanta and Savannah, which was the breadbasket of the Southern Army. It's called the March to the Sea. Thank you, Jennifer. The March to the Sea. And then from Savannah, he went north and, and basically destroyed the capacity of the Southern Army to feed itself. And civilians died. But this is a way to end the war. And indeed, I don't think Grant ended the Civil War. I think Sherman ended the Civil War. Sherman ended the Civil War by being willing to go to where the civilians were, and instead of civilians writing letters to soldiers in the front saying how wonderful war was and the ability of the fight and keep on fighting and we're all safe and everything's good at home, suddenly the letters that showed up at the front were, we're starving because the Northern Army burnt all our food. Please stop this madness. Let's get this over with. And those are indeed the letters that were being sent from the South. So this idea that you can only kill combatants in war prolongs war, makes it longer, and more innocents, ultimately more real innocents, die. Whereas it's not clear that if you're a Southerner promoting the Southern cause and promoting the war and promoting aggression, that you're innocent. You're not innocent at all. Innocent civilians will die. First of all, most civilians are not innocent. Most civilians support the regime. Most civilians work in order to fund and facilitate the regime. Very few are actual innocents. And they are the victims of their own regime. They are the victims of those who initiate war. The party that is defending itself, the party that has been attacked, has no responsibility towards civilians or otherwise of the attacking country. And if you want to understand this, I really encourage you, right? I'm talking about a war of self-defense. I really encourage you to check out the my essay on just war theory. Just War Theory versus America. It's online, available for free. You can also find lectures that I gave on the morality of war. I talk about this in great detail. I think it's incredibly important work, if I say so myself, applying the objectivist ethics to war. So if you want to understand why it's okay to kill civilians in a war of self-defense, read my essay on just war theory. Yeah, I mean, the aggressor has no right to kill anybody. The aggressor should immediately lay down the arms and surrender. That's the only moral thing they can do. So the aggressor is already outside, is already evil, it's already bad. There is nothing good that they can do other than stop. All right. Mary Eileen, Thomistic, did I misunderstand? I don't remember where I said that, but I think what I meant with Luther, what I meant was the Reformation, which would be Luther, not Thomas. So maybe I misspoke, sorry. WCZN, my degree is in econ and finance. I forgot most of it. Could you recommend a good textbook for revising each? Thanks. Well, I mean, do you want to revise the lousy economic education you got? I mean, the econ books I would recommend are not going to be what you probably studied with, because they're not mainstream. I would recommend von Mises. I would recommend the main book here that I would recommend is Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt. In terms of finance, God, I mean, any textbook on finance modern textbook on finance would be pretty good, would be a good start. If you wanted, a popular book about investment, I think Random Walk Down Wall Street is pretty good. But yeah, I would get a textbook in finance. They're pretty good. But in terms of economics and economic theory, there's very little good, and there's very little that's better than Hazlitt's Economic in One Lesson and the stuff that Mises wrote decades ago. Mary Eileen, we have BLM, but Sherman is still very vilified. Yes, Sherman has always been vilified. He's vilified because he burnt the foodstuff of civilians because we have such an altruistic conception of war. We fight wars and we tie our hands behind our back with altruism. And that's just, that is a reality, right? That is a reality. So I encourage you to read my essay on just war theory to understand my approach to what fighting wars means. All right, we'll call this a day and remind you, please to use Patreon and yaronbrookshow.com/membership to become a monthly supporter of the show. Remind you that the show is supported by contributions from people like you. It couldn't exist without you, without your financial support. So please consider making a regular contribution. If we can up those monthly contributions significantly, then I can also bug you less here. But again, we're missing about 2/3. And if you're in a position to increase your contribution from 100 to 250 or 250 to 500 or from 25 to 100, that is amazing. And I'd really, really appreciate it. All right, Andrew says, regarding Dugin's view that identity is based on collectivism, it's almost like he is right in a concrete bound sense. The concept human being depends on the existence of more than one being, but not sure that he means that. No, he doesn't mean that. He means you get your identity from tradition, from a church, from something beyond you, something more important than you, something external to you. You get your identity as an individual from the group. And you are ultimately subservient to the group. Now, he's pretending that anytime we use a concept that refers to more than one instance, that is a form of collectivism. But that's bizarre. Man, I'm a man, ooh, but there are other men. Therefore, I'm part of a collective. But the whole point of a collectivism as contrast to individualism, is that the group is more important than the individual. That your life is subservient to it. And he talks a lot about tradition, about empire, about, you're subservient to that tradition. You're subservient to the empire. You're subservient to the church. There are things above and beyond you that you must live for. What he really objects is you living for yourself based on your own judgment in pursuit of your own happiness. He's really opposed to that kind of individualism, and his collectivism is not a naive collectivism. It's a full-fledged authoritarianism. That's what it is. That's its nature. If you read his books or if you study him, there was, let me just see, there was a great quote from one of his books. Oh, what am I doing? That's not what I wanted to do. Let me see if I can find it about, what he thinks should be done, God, I keep doing the wrong thing here. I'm trying to look fast and I'm not going to find it. Not going to find it, unfortunately. All right. Anyway, he's anti the individual. He's anti the pursuit of happiness. He's anti-individual decision-making. He's anti-individual pursuing his own values or thinking for himself. He's for the group, the collective, in as an authoritarian way as one can be. Wow. Here's breaking news for you. Trinity College in Dublin. Trinity College, this is news, right? Trinity College in Dublin has just announced that they are committing to cutting all ties with Israel. So you now have a university giving in to the protests. You now have a university embracing the demands of the protests. By the way, several American universities, several leading American universities have told the demonstrators that they would consider and investigate, look into their whole Consider their whole attachment to Israel and their relation with Israel. So we got Trinity College in Dublin severing relations with Israel. I wonder if any American university is going to do that. It's going to be really, really, really interesting to watch what happens in the next months, days, years. Hard to tell, but yeah, it is. Wow. I mean, Dublin, Ireland is one of the most anti-Israel places in the world. I guess surprisingly or not surprising. Oh, I think I found the quote. Here's the quote from Dugin's The Fourth Policy Theory. Quote, "We must strike the individual, abolish him, and cast him into the periphery of political considerations." Whereas our political theory, is all based on the individual and protecting him. His political theory is cast him out, destroy him, no individuals. You must be just a cog in the machine and nothing and nobody. Okay, Apollo Zeus says, what are psychological consequences of acknowledging the good as being the good as opposed to just condemning the bad? Well, it's the knowledge that you are being just. It's the knowledge that you are pursuing your self-interest. It is the satisfaction one gets from a trade in which you are benefit, but so is the other side. It is the recognition of the win-win nature of the world. It enhances one's benevolence. So it is incredibly rewarding to be able to say to somebody, to pat somebody on the back for something good that they did. You're recognizing good. You're recognizing in yourself that you are a supporter of the good, that you are a promoter of the good. So it's enhancing of self-esteem and self-worth. Yeah, Ireland has been anti-Israel for many, many years. It comes from their somewhat abandoned religion, but it comes from the altruistic Catholicism. It has nothing to do. They were anti-Israel before immigration. They've been the most anti-Israel country in Europe. And I think it has to do with their Catholicism and their altruism. So it has nothing to do with immigrants. You'd think that if they hated the immigrants are primarily Muslim, are the ones they hate, then they would support Israel. But they hate Israel. What is this collective punishment? When one goes to war with an enemy nation, one counts as collective punishment. It is besieging a city, collective punishment. What about total war? War is collective punishment. That is what it is. This is why it's important for you as an individual in a country to pay attention. Pay attention to your politicians. Because you will be punished, right? I mean, it's collective punishment when Biden raises our taxes. What's with collective punishment? To hell with that. But it is. War is collective punishment. War is not individual combat. War is not MMA or whatever it's called. War is not a cage fight. War is this group versus that group. And if you're stuck on one of those groups, you're at war. Your only hope is to get out of there if you don't want to be part of it. But as long as you stay, you have to be perceived as the enemy. You have to be perceived as part of it. There's absolutely nothing wrong in war with collective punishment. You punish anything that is in your way to victory. I mean, think about defeating the Nazis. Could the Allies have defeated the Nazis without killing a lot of innocent French people who were fighting the Nazis? No. The British bombed French towns knowing that some of the French resistance would die in their attacks. And the French resistance often targeted themselves because they knew it was what was necessary to win. You cannot fight a war if you're concerned with who is innocent and who is not, who's on this side and who is that side. You have to do everything and whatever is necessary to destroy the enemy. That's it. So, I mean, the idea that you can avoid killing civilians in a war is bizarre. The whole nature of a war, as compared to a gunfight among two people, is that it's a large group going against a large group, and you cannot. There is no mechanism by which you can differentiate. It's science fiction. And I'm all for total war. Total war is the only way to fight. It's the only way to fight to win. And once you win, by the way, when you fight with total war, you win quickly. When you win quickly, more lives are saved. So if you really care about human life, you would be pro-total war from the perspective of that nation that is fighting a war of self-defense. Notice that the bad guys don't have any qualms about killing. So we're supposed to tie the hands of the good guys and prevent them from winning and let the bad guys win because the good guys are not allowed to kill. It's just, this is not chivalrous. Ayn Rand describes it as war is the most barbaric human activity. And to impose laws on a barbaric activity is just bizarre. It's barbaric, by its very fundamental nature. If you're interested in where the rules of engagement come from, read my essay, Just War Theory versus America. It's all in there. It's all in there. It comes from altruism. Just war theory is an altruistic theory developed by the Christians and perfected, if you will, perfected by its secularizers. And the modern version was secularized by an American philosopher by the name of Michael Walzer, who teaches at West Point. And this is what he teaches. Andrew, if there was no individualism, what is the point of names? I guess that's why names are discarded in favor of comrade or prisoner number in collectivistic hellholes. Yes. And in collectivism, names might differentiate this cog from that cog because different cogs have different responsibilities. But that's it. Names do not recognize you as an individual worthy of an independent life. Your life only is of value to the extent that it serves, the collective. Paul, $50. Thank you, Paul. Really, really appreciate that. Paul says, Stephen Hicks says Dugin is a quasi-Nazi. He loves all the German philosophers. Hitler loved and thought Marx was right on economics. Yeah, I think Stephen Hicks is right. Thank you, Paul. By the way, that was your 20th super chat. Impressive. Thank you. I think Dugin is a quasi-Nazi. He's certainly a fascist. And, but much of the way he views the world is through a lens of kind of a Nazi. He's definitely a huge fan of all the German philosophers, starting with Kant on. But he's modern in the sense that he's adopted the language of the left and uses it. He reads Foucault, he reads all the postmodernists, and he embraces that. And you know, again, Foucault and the postmodernists are the consequence, the outcome, and this is why he's disingenuous. He knows that Foucault and the postmodernists who've influenced the left are collectivists. That's why he likes them, one of the reasons he likes them. And yet, he's trying to convince you that the left is individualistic, which is bizarre, a completely bizarre notion, when it's identitarian. Identity, how should you identify yourself? By the group you belong to. That's your identity. Your identity is determined by you know, your sexual orientation or your identity is determined by the color of your skin. The left is racist and collectivist. So yeah, I agree with Stephen. Thank you, Paul. All right, guys. Thank you. That got us a little closer to the goal. Not quite there, but closer. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Andrew. And thanks to the rest of you who asked questions. And I will see you all tomorrow. Same time, same place, same goals. Financial at least. And we'll see. I'm not sure what the topic will be tomorrow. And then Friday, same structure, but the topic at the end of the show will be a positive one. That is the goal anyway. Although it's getting harder and harder to be positive in this crazy world. Bye, guys. See you soon.